Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Thank you so much for tuning in. We know that you could be listening and watching so many other things, but the fact that you're here rocking with us, we want you to know that we are grateful to have you with us. You are not going to be disappointed by today's episode. You shouldn't really actually be disappointed by any of our episodes, but this one right here, you're going to love because we have a powerful, that word's going to make sense in a minute. We have a powerful guest waiting in the wings for today's episode. We're going to be talking about that power. What is it? What is it not? How do we harness it? How do we use it? Because we all have it. It's available to every last one of us. It's not for certain people. Don't worry. My special guest will help all of this make sense. Today, we have none other than Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts back on the show one more time because she has a brand new book called Power Moves. But wait, it's not what you think. So make sure you get your pen and your paper ready, get your notes app open, because I promise you, she's going to drop some nuggets of wisdom that you are going to want to remember. So let me not belabor this any further. Let me go get Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts so we can have this conversation just for you. Hey, Pastor Sarah, welcome back to the His and Her Money Show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
We are excited to have you back. It's been a minute, but as always, you've been doing so much to help so many people around the world. But I don't know, there might be a couple people who are being introduced to you for the first time, but there's also some people who know you from afar. So I'm curious, if somebody was meeting you for the first time or really getting to know you for the first time, what would you say? Who is Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts?
I would say that Sarah Jakes Roberts is a woman who is sharing the lessons that God is teaching her about life, love, healing with as many people who will listen. That's, I think, would sum up all of the things that I do and the things that I am most proud of.
Wow, thank you. You have a new book, and that's the topic of today's discussion called Power Moves. And when I first got the book, I thought I was going in one direction just off the title. I was like, yeah, because she's like a powerful preacher. She's got businesses. Then her and her husband, Pastor Torrey, they do big things. So they about to teach me how to do all the things to be considered powerful. And so this is a grammar education right here because it says power moves, but it really means power moves. Here's what I mean. It means that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and that's going to lead to our conversation today, that power has movement. As you say, power is fluid. So help us understand, before we dive deeper, what did you mean when you titled this work, Power Moves?
Well, I'll have to tell you that I think that most people probably felt like you did, that Power Moves was going to be a book about like how to do X, Y, and Z in order to accomplish X, Y, and Z. But I really wanted to write a book that was about the fluidity of power. When looking at my own journey, I recognized that I've had all of these different experiences where I was left dealing with the power of fear, the power of insecurity, the power of inadequacy, the power of shame. And so I was well acquainted with power when it was pointed in my direction. What was confusing for me is once I started speaking and people started telling me I was a powerhouse. And I'm like, how does the girl who struggled with the power of all of these things become a powerhouse? And what I learned is that there is a reclaiming of our power from experiences, from expectations that allows us to then make those types of power moves that I think most people are hungry for. But the reality is that many of us want to make the power moves without really allowing that inner power to move within us to allow for that reclamation. And so I wanted to write a book that gave people permission to flow as power flows, whether you are in your 20s or your 50s. What you deem powerful in your 20s is different than what's powerful in your 50s. You could be, right as I am, a person who wears many different hats. And what makes me powerful as a preacher is much different than what makes me powerful as a mother. And I feel like we should spend less time thinking about what we need to do to be powerful, and more time getting in the flow of power and defining what power means for all of the specific areas of our life.
Now, you said that because of this fluidity of power, because it can move, because as you just alluded to, it can look different in one situation of your life versus another. You talk about the fact that our power needs to be protected. If we don't protect it, it can be kidnapped by things like fear, by things like shame, because power moves, because power is fluid. Where do we begin this journey? I know that you want us to stop looking outward and start looking inward. What's step one on that inward journey that you want us to take to reclaim the power that is rightfully ours?
I will tell you, especially as it relates to women, women are often uncomfortable having conversations about power. I think there's a fear connected with it. There's a pressure that is connected with it. And so I think specifically as it relates to my experience as a woman, it can be difficult for us to have conversations about harnessing our power. What's easier for us to discuss are the moments where we feel powerless. Now, if I ask you to start listing the areas where you feel powerless to change, where you feel powerless to speak up, where you feel powerless in changing something that's happening in your family, then people's brain starts churning. They're like, okay, wait, I can tell you I feel powerless when it comes to buying this house. I feel powerless when it comes to maintaining this standard that I want and love. And so when we talk about identifying those things that end up taking our power away from us, it starts with identifying where are the areas where you feel powerless. When you're in a meeting and you have an idea that you think could add value, but you choose not to speak up. When you are dealing with some family situation and you feel the pressure to just do what everyone else does in the family, when in reality you're thinking differently. Those are moments that are not just something that are uncomfortable. Those are the moments that teach us that it is not okay for you to show up in your power. It is not okay for you to own what you know or to express how you feel. And so when targeting those areas, it's important, even if you're not ready, because this is where most people get caught up. They're like, yeah, but I'm not ready to start speaking up. I'm not ready to be the troublemaker. I don't want to change things in my family. I don't want those issues. If you can at least acknowledge within yourself that in that moment, I chose to allow myself to go with the flow instead of showing up in power, you can begin to identify the ways in which you are shrinking in order to accommodate other people's beliefs or other people's comfort. I have a section in the book where we talk about marinating before activating, because a lot of people don't want to just go from 0 to 100. Some people are like, rip the band-aid off, I'm ready. Others of us, we need to marinate before we activate things. And so I start by telling them to marinate on those times where you're showing up as someone who is inauthentic, you're showing up as someone that's going against the core of what you believe, and then begin to practice. What would you have said differently? How would you have said it? And to begin to give them language so the next time they're in those moments, they're not as comfortable just going with the flow, and they have practiced the language to insert their power. And so for me, it very much so is a guide from going from being powerless into really moving in your power.
How difficult has it been for, or is it, or was it for you, as you talked about that your power looks different in different roles? All of us have multiple hats that we wear. You are a pastor, you're a New York Times bestselling author, your wife, your mom, your daughter, and your power is going to look different in different spots. So, is that overwhelming? Was it tough to be able to? Because when you're first maybe starting this journey that you're taking us on, you're trying to reclaim your power. You might try to apply the same thing in everywhere that you go. Show up strong. I'm the boss. I'm the king. I'm the queen. And it won't work in scenario B, but it does work in scenario A. So that process of differentiating what power looks like in these different roles, can you talk about the journey that you went on to kind of master that? And can you help us figure out how to do the same?
I love that you asked this question, because what I have learned is I wanted to feel powerful in every area of my life. But I did not realize that what I really wanted to feel, I was calling it powerful, but what I really wanted to feel was arrogant and invincible. I wanted to feel like I was on top of the world in every area of my life and just someone who was beyond human. When it quickly became evident that that was not going to be my reality, I had to recognize that flowing the way that power flows requires vulnerability. vulnerability. And there are some moments where I am up preaching and I am quite literally jumping up and down and beating my chest. And then there are other moments where I am ill and I'm not feeling well, or I may be going through something that's causing me some anxiety. And power in that moment is reaching out to my husband and saying, I need help. It's sometimes declining something that I signed up to do because I know I'm not in the mental space to do it. That is power. And that level of power requires vulnerability. What I have learned in people expressing to me how they've connected with my ministry is that much of what they connected with, like they like the moments where I'm up and I'm preaching, but what they love more than anything are the moments where they feel like she's just like me. That's authenticity. Your vulnerability, your transparency is what has allowed so many people to connect with me. And it taught me a valuable lesson about power is not about coming off as superhuman. Power is about coming off as so human, but in spite of, I am still pursuing God's vision for my life. I'm still in a position where I believe that my divinity has the capacity to outweigh my humanity. That is power. It's not necessarily doing everything right. Power is apologizing. Power is saying, can we try that again? And that level of power can, at first, make you grieve the idea of who you thought you would be in every moment. But then after that, it is so beyond liberating. That is when you become a force, because you realize I can apologize. I can take a scar. I'm not going to be defined by something that I did yesterday, because I will not define myself by that. That to me is the beauty of becoming a force who recognizes what power truly is.
Yeah, I think that from afar, I feel like that's one of your greatest superpowers is your transparency. You're never acting as though you got it all figured out. You talk about the things you do figure out, that you do have figured out, but you talk about the things that have been struggles and challenges, and you always been real. Like when you were talking just now, I instantly flashed back. I don't know if it was, I know it was during the pandemic. I don't know if it was 21 or 22, but you and Pastor Tora Ray were live on Instagram, but you all were in two different places because I believe you had, we're dealing with COVID and he was
Yeah,
somewhere else.
COVID.
And you were just like, transparent, like, nah, like I don't like this, and I wish this wasn't the case. And like you were, tearing up. And Pastor Torrey went into husband mode. He was like, I don't care, I'm coming over there right now. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a real
I remember
raw
that so
marital
well.
moment. You know what I mean? And you just always been that way. I mean, there's a million examples of you just being real. How did you get there though, man? It's like in this world we live in, from everything we see on social media, we look up to, we aspire to, we see in people's highlight reels. And so sometimes we walk through life just trying to show our highlight reel and not being the true, authentic, powerful self that is available to us. How have you allowed yourself to be okay with showing your mountaintops and even showing valley moments?
Well, I fought really hard to get to a place where I could love myself. When I became a mother as a teenager, I didn't feel worthy of love. I didn't feel worthy of forgiveness. I dealt with so much shame. And I mean, I had my son at 14, and I probably went through about 10 years of just like, you don't deserve this, you don't deserve that, you're not smart, you're not this, you're not that. And after about 10 years, I was like, you know what? I am going to take a dare and love myself. And no one else may love me. Like, no one else may understand how I could love myself after all that I've done. No one else may understand my decision making, but I am going to choose to believe that God's love applies to me too. I'm going to dare to see myself the way that God sees me, and I am going to protect it fiercely, because I recognize that I had spent 10 years of other people's opinions, other people's thoughts. And so I knew I had to protect this love that I was going to incubate for myself. And I thought it was just going to be for me. I didn't think that I was going to have a platform or that people would see me. And then when it became clear that people were going to see me, I was like, God, I will go wherever you tell me to go. But please help me to not lose myself. Please help me to hang on to this love, because I fought so hard to get here. And so sometimes I am intentionally raw, and that like I could be glammed up one day, and then the next day I could be showing off a fresh face with a fresh pimple. I could have the wig on one day and have the wig off the next day. And it's not a shenanigan for me. It's just like, these are all the versions of who I am. And I don't want people to just be connected to this idea of this powerful preacher's daughter and all. I don't want that. Like, I want people to look at me and see a person, because when I look at me, I don't see myself as a preacher. Like, I don't see myself as the person who's got these views and these followers. I look at myself as a person who's on a journey and learning who God is and sharing what I learned along the way. And like, that's it for me.
Man, so good. I want to talk about the stewardship of power, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If you look at any platform online, you got 1 million+ followers. You go on tours and you do stadium. Like some of us do shows. Pastor Sarah do stadiums. Okay, you have power. How do you not let power consume you, kidnap you, change you away from the identity that God gave you? Because it's easier said than done. Power is powerful, and it is fluid, and it does move. So how do we be good stewards of the power that we are reclaiming and taking hold of?
Man, that's such a good question. And to be honest, I feel like it's something that I'm constantly fighting for, primarily because when you do begin to have some of these benchmarks, I wouldn't even necessarily call it success, because I think people can have stadiums and they can pack out tours and the people don't leave change. So I don't want to call that success. But I do think that whenever you reach a certain level of influence, whether you're influencing people for God's power or to do their own thing, that it is easy for it to be hijacked by other people's agendas and other people's prerogatives. And so what I have tried to do is to make sure that I do not feel entitled to results. I didn't manufacture this. Like, it's hard to explain, because I feel like you'd have to see the whole story to understand that. Like, I wasn't building an audience. I wasn't building a brand. I've tried to be very smart about making sure that if God's going to place people under my influence, that I'm a good steward over their time, their resources, their hearts, and their souls. But that is in response to what God was already doing. And so because I recognize that this didn't start with me, I don't try to act like I manufactured this. I think secondly is recognizing that I have to make sure that this maintains the vision that God gave me. Like, God gave me a specific vision about what Woman Evolve is supposed to be. And now that Woman Evolve has grown to these heights, there's plenty of sponsors and people who want to participate in it. But if it does not align with that initial goal, which is creating a safe space where women from all backgrounds can come into an environment and have a divine encounter with God, if it does not add to that, it is taking away from it. And that means that it can't just be like, oh, well, it won't hurt it. No, how does it add to it? Like, everything has to add. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we had, I think, 6 or 7 corporate sponsors at our event in September. And every single sponsor, like, none of it felt like, and now here's a break for our sponsors, because we were giving away scholarships, because we were giving away resources, because we wanted to make sure that we are going to add value to the lives of these women. And if you're coming and you want to be a sponsor and you can't give something away, you can't add something to these women, a resource, then you're not able to walk this journey with us. And so keeping that vision in the forefront of all of our decision making is a part of our core values.
Man, that's so good. So it sounds like part of your stewardship is understanding what God wants you to do.
Yeah.
And you have to go on a journey to do that. And now when something doesn't make sense for the vision that God gave you, that adds a little ease to the no, because that's not what God has. Can you help us that are beginning this journey that you are encouraging, teaching, loving us through your new book, Power Moves? How do we get that picture from God? How did you go about that download, that clarity that you got from heaven, so that you know which way to go, you know which doors to walk through, which doors to close? Talk about gaining that vision from God.
That's why I really started the book. Like, it does end in helping you to make power moves about innovation, because power is moving with ideas, right? There were 20 years ago, the idea of a podcast was maybe just beginning to percolate, right? But radio was still king.
Yeah.
20 years ago, maybe Netflix was still doing DVDs, but now they're completely streaming. So power is moving in ideas as well. But until you are the person who can facilitate the innovation, then we are going to be asking God to give us a vision for what we can do, instead of who can we become in order to do what needs to be be done.
Mm.
And so, in order to get that vision, I think it really comes down to understanding who you are and who you aren't. When you understand who you are and who you aren't, it helps you to better qualify what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
And I think that that is part of what happened for me is I got to a space where I started agreeing with God about who I am. So I just, man, I get excited thinking about this because so many of us agree with our shame, we agree with our fear, we agree with our environment, we agree with our community. If they say we can't buy homes, we can't buy homes. If they say that we can't break generational curses, we can't break generational curses. And we begin to agree with the adversary concerning our lives. And so if we're going to do anything in the earth that's going to affect change, if we're going to do anything in the earth that looks like power, we have to first agree with God about who we are. When you begin to agree, oh, I just feel this. I'm such a church. I'm so tapped in, I guess.
Let's
But
go
when
for it.
you
Let it
begin
out.
when you begin to agree with God, it changes what you think is possible. You don't even want God to give you a vision based off of who you are right now. Because if God gives you a vision based off of who you are right now, you'll be like, no, I can't do that. It's going to be too hard. I don't have this. I don't have that. But when you begin to agree with God about who you are, God can give you a vision and you're like, just run me in the direction. I'll take the class. I'll learn how to do it myself. So agree with God about who you are. And then recognize that in the beginning, when God told man and woman to fill the earth, that he was giving them a task that almost seemed impossible if they were looking at it through a human eye, because the earth was filled. If you look at all of Genesis 1, there's trees, there are fish in the sea. Like, it looks like the earth is full. And so he put the task on them to not be blinded by what looks like fullness, but to see where you can add value. And so from a place of agreeing with God about who you are, from a place of understanding that you have something to offer the world, then you get to look at the areas where there are gaps. And if there is a gap that is highlighted in your eyes, that is your place to fill. I'm gonna stop because I'm a preacher and
Ain't
you know
nobody stop.
I'm
I don't see no. Who said stop? I don't see no clock.
talking.
Well, we appreciate that. That's so much wisdom that you just dropped on us. And now I want to pivot just slightly because there's so many couples that tune in to the His and Her Money Show. I'm curious, this journey that you went on, this evolution, shout out to Women Evolve, this evolution that you've been on with reclaiming your power and letting God use you in powerful ways, the personal journey that you went on, how did that show up in your marriage? How did that add a plus sign to the health of your marriage?
Okay, I love that you asked this question because so many people are like, yeah, I want to be powerful, but I also want to keep my man. I want to be powerful, but I don't want her to forget where she came from. Like, I want him to be powerful, but I don't want him to come up and leave me behind, right?
Right.
One of the things that I love about this book is a lot of times we make our transformations feel like, and if they can't go with you, they can't go with you. And that sounds good for a soundbite, but the reality is that there are some people in our lives who can go with us, but we owe them an introduction to who we are becoming. We don't just flip the switch and be like, get with the program or get lost, right? Like, you have been my partner, you've been my friend, you've been my sibling, and I want to show you what's happening inside of me. I want to tell you that for the last few years, I have found it difficult. My husband and I'll give you my life as an example. When I married him, I'd gone through some healing. I'd bought a home. It was myself and my two children. I was in a state where I was like, I am so good. I'm never going to get married again. I don't need anything. I got my stuff together. Like, I had lost 50 pounds. I was like, what? Okay. And then I meet my husband and I'm like, this is going to be nice, but like, you can't change who I am. Like, I have to maintain this person that I fought for. And then I realized that I was hanging on to myself, but I was going to damage my marriage. And so part of power moving is recognizing that we have to be willing to become one with our partner. And in order to do that, we get to tell them what we're afraid of, and we get to tell them what we're looking forward to. I had to make space for my husband's perspective to add to my decision making, which means that I had to shed the idea of being an independent woman who didn't need no input from anyone. And as I began to do that, I also realized that I was having a difficult time speaking up sometimes, that I would just go with the flow because I was afraid that if I said something he didn't agree with, that our marriage would be in trouble. And I was also robbing him of a fuller perspective as well. And I didn't just start speaking out. I started telling him like, hey, I've actually been quiet when I had some thoughts and opinions because I was afraid of rejection. rejection. I was afraid of abandonment, but I'm going to start speaking up. And I want you to tell me, like, how do my words land? How can I say things differently? How can I say them better? And I feel like as a result of this collaboration that we have been able to flow and power together. And I don't think that we should be afraid of the other person growing, the other person discovering more of their power, because it allows for the unit to become better, especially when we're having the right types of conversations.
I heard you all having a conversation on his podcast. He was interviewing you, and you all were kind of talking about this, and it was the conversation was related to you all's entrepreneurial endeavors and how you all had to make space for each other's input, and like because you all were saying, I'm just saying what y'all were saying, that Pastor Torre can be like, no, this is how you do it, this is how it is done, this is how you improve it, and there was a back and forth that you all had to go through to be able to hear and make space for each other's voices in these business decisions. So this is a money show, and we have lots of entrepreneurs tuned in. Power moves in entrepreneurship and relationships. How do you make all this fluidity calm down and get in order, get in alignment with all those lines being crossed?
um, Well, I think that we have to recognize when we are in work mode, because we are different people when we are in work mode. And there
Got
have
it.
been times where we've been talking to one another as business partners, or one person's a business partner, but the other person is in spouse mode. It's very easy for us to just be like, boom, boom, boom to our team, and then be like, I need you to pick up the kids. I need you to make sure they have lotion. And then like that same, it just don't land well. It's just like, who you talking to? It very much so requires us to be like, all right, take it beat, calm down. I know you in your flow, but you're talking to your partner now. And so we've had to recognize that, like, sometimes we don't flip the hat very quickly. Sometimes we wearing many hats, but we have on the wrong hat in the wrong room. And so being sensitive to that has been really important. I think also understanding when the other person is better fit to make a decision. So my husband thinks very fast on his feet, and I need time to process. And there
Back
are
to the
moments where
marination.
we right back to that marination. But there are times when we're having a business meeting and they don't have time for me to marinate, so I have to let him take the lead. And then what he'll do is he'll get the ball down as far as he can, and then once that's finished, he knows that, like, I could come back in 2 days and be like, actually, I think we should modify this part of it. And so I think understanding one another's strengths is really important, especially when you're in entrepreneurship or partnership together. Even with the kids, sometimes it's like, you need to take the lead on that one, I'll take the lead on this one, because we recognize who's better at certain things. And I will say, lastly, is at the end of the day, you have to remember that all of this could fall apart, but the marriage has to stay
Come
together.
on.
And if both people are willing to say, you know what, the business can shut down, the marriage cannot, then we're able to keep the main thing the main thing.
You alluded to the fact that you are a mom as well, and the age range of the kids vary. I wonder, for the parents that are listening, do you have any wisdom on how we can help our children? In this day and age, things are starting much sooner as far as information exchanging and decision making. They got to make quick decisions on their feet when their parents aren't around. How do we help our children understand power that they possess, and how not to let that power be kidnapped by things that adults do as well, from the fear to the rejection to the shame to the peer pressure? Like, how have you walked your children through this? Have you found moments where you are able to impart some wisdom to them on this matter? And do you have any wisdom for the parents that are tuned in right now?
First of all, I have to say that we have a house full. We're a blended family with six, and they are in different stages. And one thing I know for sure is each child needs a different recipe, right? Like, they all need something different. And as a result of that, I have a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm still getting all of the ingredients right, especially as we move into the teenage years for our two younger. But what I will say is, one of the things that I've tried to be really intentional about is allowing them to be the first partakers of my authenticity and transparency, because I want to be the first partaker of theirs. And oftentimes, we do a good job making sure that we're filling them with the information they need, but we aren't always giving them space to tell us what information they already have. And so I've tried to really create space for them to tell me, like, well, what's happening at school and what did you think about that? Sometimes we can hear a song And instead of being like, you don't need to be singing that, I'll be like, okay, but did you hear those lyrics? Do you know what that means? Okay. And then I tell them what it means. And then they're like, oh, yeah, that's it. That's different. But really treating them as people who have minds and thoughts and ideas and walking this thing out with them has been helpful for me. I will say my other children are 20, the oldest are 27, 26, 21, and 21. And they are moving out. They're beginning to establish their life on their own. And one of the most rewarding parts of that stage of parenting is them being able to come back to us and tell us, like, oh my gosh, you were right about so much of this. We started working on their credit early. We started trying to help them budget early, but it was not until those bills came in their name that they realized that we really do have food at home. And being able to walk them through that without judgment has been really great. Parenting is, I think, one of the most challenging yet rewarding roles that anyone can ever take on. And I think judging yourself too harshly before they are finished is one of the areas where many of us can lose sight. I will say, as a parent, because power moves, it's never too late for you to go back and fix things that you haven't done well and to introduce a new way of being into the dynamic. And I try to give myself permission to do that, even if that means apologizing and starting over with them.
Before we let you go, because I know you have so much to do, but there's one last group of demographic I want you to speak wisdom to, if you don't mind, and that's the people who have been operating in their power. They've been flowing as the power moves. They've maybe been stewarding it well, but I believe as somebody who's constantly in the seat of decision maker, constantly the one to be the question answerer, I wonder if power can become fatigue for some. Has it become, in certain seasons, a fatigue in your life? And if that's a possibility, what's your advice on how to take care of ourselves as we learn how to move with our power?
For sure, it has become fatigue in my life. And in those moments, I realize that I am married to an expectation of who I should be that doesn't align with who I can be.
Mm.
There are seasons where I don't, if I'm honest, if I were to be honest, I just don't have it. Like, I don't have another word. I don't have any inspiration. I don't have it in me to make another decision. But what I do is I go and scrape at the bottom of the barrel and I find enough to throw something at it. And in the end, I end up not just depleted, I end up resentful and sometimes making harmful decisions with, like, now I need to go eat a Big Mac and a 10-piece nugget. Like, now I got to fix myself because I decided to show up in a space where I really didn't have capacity. Power itself should not lend itself to fatigue, but your definition of what power must look like in every season could lead to fatigue. And so I would challenge that person who is constantly in the decision-making seat to ask themselves, how have I allowed something that once made me feel powerful to ultimately render me powerless against advocating for what I really need? Who am I afraid of disappointing? What am I afraid will happen if I no longer show up in this capacity? And is that true? Like, is it true that the world's going to fall apart? Is it true that they'll never have anyone who can show up for them? Is it true that we're going to lose the house if I don't work myself like a dog? Is that true? Or am I so afraid of slipping backwards? Am I so afraid that one day off is going to change the whole trajectory of my life that I have tied myself to overworking myself into a space that is going to end up ending my life early? Because we're not just talking about, oh, I'll catch a nap. We're talking about shaving years off of your life. And is that yes worth it? And I think that if we really begin to ask ourselves those hard questions, we will see that we have more flexibility than we give ourselves credit for.
Man, so good. The name of the book is Power Moves. Can you please tell everybody a little more detail about what they will find when they receive their copy of your new book, Power Moves?
Power Moves, Ignite Your Confidence and Become a Force is a book that is meant to meet you in the area where you may be feeling powerless, but you haven't been able to fully give it language. It's going to help you understand how much power you have for different tasks and roles within your life. It's going to help you understand how you showing up in power affects other people and how you showing up in power can change your life. My goal with writing this book is for it to be a manual that that meets you in every season of your life, that we're constantly redefining power because power is constantly moving, and that is okay. This is a liberation manual that's going to help you break free from other people's expectations and your experiences in a way that allows you to be fully present.
And you are a great writer, and you did another phenomenal job with this book, if I do say so myself. And you're also taking Power Moves on the road. You on tour. How do we find out if you come into our city, Pastor Sarah?
Well, you can find out by going to sarahjakesroberts.com. So I'm excited. I think the cities that we have left, that where we have seats left, are Chicago, DMV, and Los Angeles. So if you want to come have the Power Moves experience, you can visit sarahjakesroberts.com. I'm excited. We've got conversation partners in every city. So you won't just be hearing from me, but some industry leaders and thought leaders from different fields to help you understand how power moves and flows within different spaces of our life.
Awesome. As a final note, would you mind there might be somebody tuned in who's, going back and forth, like they're getting fired up, listening to your journey, listening to your wisdom, but then they start to just think about their personal circumstances and start to feel overwhelmed. Like, man, that's good for her, but I just don't know with my situation. If you had a chance to talk to that person, how would you encourage them to go on the journey to reclaim their power?
I would tell them to not become so enamored by my power that you miss out on the reality that you have power.
Wait a minute. Hold on. That was that. Now let that marinate. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Okay. Continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, don't be so enamored by my power or anyone else's power that you fall for the illusion that you have none. Each of us have our own space, our own definition of power to embody. And if you are so disillusioned by mine that you discredit yours, you will never see what you, being the most powerful version of yourself, can look like. Literally everything down to mosquitoes have a purpose in the earth. Why would God get down to you and say, I'll skip that person? No, there is power assigned to your life. And I want to help you through this book unearth the power that God has assigned to your life. And when you do that, when you embark on this journey, you will see that you never had to look at anyone else's power to begin with, that it was always about what was inside of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the name of the book is Power Moves, Ignite Your Confidence and Become a Force. The author is New York Times bestselling author Sarah Jakes Roberts. We have a link to the book, a link to her website in the show notes of this episode. Get the book, show up to the tour, start to reclaim your power. Pastor Sarah, thank you so much for coming by the His and Her Money Show and dropping wisdom on us yet again.
Thank you so much. My love to your wife, and thank you all for what you're doing.
That's all we got for this time, guys. I hope you took notes. I hope you're ready to reclaim your power and move into your destiny. Become the person, the man, the woman that God created you to be. This book, Power Moves by Sarah Jakes Roberts, is a great asset for you on that journey. Be sure to get your copy. And that's all we got for this time, guys. It's been great. Until next time, peace.